I call the 2025 General Plan Committee to order. Would everyone please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everybody of the rules of the meetings. Let's show respect for anyone speaking and not have side conversations going on. If you do want to talk, we elected to use this as our symbol to get the floor at the earliest convenience. As roll call goes, I understand everyone's here, but two members, Steve Kirk and Tony Wadowski. And I'd like to thank Mayor Lord for appointing two of our alternates to full-time voting members of the committee, Stephen Kirk and David Wilson. Congratulations. As Stephen, thank you. Yep. As Stephen and Tony are not here tonight, I'd like to make a motion that they be excused. Do I hear a second? Seconded by Brennan Hampton. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Excused. Are there any comments on the minutes from the November 13th, 2012 meeting?
Chair, if I may, I have an edit. At the top in the title, it states the start time is 6 o'clock p.m. and it should be 6:30, and we're getting that fixed. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get it fixed in time for the meeting.
Okay, very good.
Second comment is I didn't see that the talking on the transportation, the total operation was noted on the minutes. That los tiempos son today.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry.
The transportation, I believe it was being tabled till,
Yeah.
Till the consultants were hired and that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I see. Yes, we can fix that.
Okay, so are there any other comments? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as we've discussed the changes for the November 13th meeting of the General Plan Committee? Do I hear a motion?
Aye.
Okay, motion by Deb, seconded by Darren.
Sure.
I couldn't tell where it came from. It came so
I
fast.
second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. This is an open call to the public to give an opportunity for the public to address the Goodyear 2025 General Plan Committee on an item listed on today's agenda or a subject that is not on the agenda. Public comment is encouraged. Please complete a speaker card listing the subject that you'd like to discuss, and unless otherwise permitted by the chair, each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Before you begin to speak, identify yourself by clearly stating for the record your name and address. Are there any speaker cards?
We don't have any.
All right. As there are no cards and I see no one raising their hand, the next order of business is planning process and organization by Leslie Dornfeld.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Happy holidays and happy Hanukkah. Celebrating that. We're at a point in the process now where we're actually beginning to move from the big ideas and the vision to actually creating the elements of the plan. And I've been working with the staff to just think through how we can best do this in a way that allows everybody to have an opportunity to represent all the ideas that are around the table, because you're all here because you have ideas about the future. Also provide you as a committee with information that you're going to need to move forward. So what we've done to date so far, just to kind of figure out what the progress we've made, is we've kind of organized ourselves. We've organized our meeting rules. We've put together some working visions that will be presented to the community in February. We've organized and held an outreach session, a visioning session, and we've organized and gotten community input and gain. So we're beginning to complete the familiarization process of where we are. And now the next step is, how do we take this huge chunk of information and begin to work in a way that we begin to create these elements. So there's a couple things that we wanted to try to do today. This is sort of what we have in front of us right now, what we need to move forward and do. Okay? First, we need to create a working framework for how we discuss and analyze the land use plan, the general plan land use plan. That's a huge part of the general plan. That really directs where development will go. And you'll remember that land use plan is that colored document. There's laws that affect the types of things we can do with that plan. And Katie's going to talk to you today about that framework and about an approach that we would like to take to land use planning. The other thing that we need to do is we need to understand each issue that's sort of associated with each of the general plan elements as they relate to Goodyear. So when we deal with the economic element or the transportation element or the parks and open space element, we need to understand what are the issues so that we can say to staff, these are the things we need to address in the general plan, this is how we want to address them, and staff can do that work and we can review it and make comments on it. We also, in doing that, we need to provide a way for us to bring new ideas into the process. You know, the general plan isn't about repeating what we've done in the past. It's about moving us forward. So we need to, and there's new ideas about everything. There's new ideas about how we provide transportation and land use and economics and infrastructure. When we did the last general plan, nobody even talked about, really to any great extent, solar or new ways of commuting. So we need to understand or have a way to, a conduit to bring these new ideas into our discussion in a structured way. Then we need to, after we kind of have all this stuff floating around in our brains, be able to figure out how to direct staff about what we want our plan to address, what we think is important for the Goodyear plan to contain. And then we have to kind of take a look at the element and review it. So after a lot of talking, I think what we're going to try to do is, what my job today is to talk about how I'd suggest that we do it and to see if you're comfortable with that approach. So before we start, we do a lot of talk about these elements. And you have in your packet, what was it, Appendix 2? This one, Appendix 3, this Goodyear 2025 outline. Right? And the only reason I'm directing it to you is we've talked with everyone. This is how staff is suggesting we organize the elements of the plan. So this isn't to put you on the spot, but who's not familiar or who is familiar with the current Goodyear general plan? Has everyone been able to just take a look at it and see what it has in it? So is there anyone that's not familiar with it?
Can I just interrupt real quick here? I just heard today that our chair, Chuck Watson, CD wasn't working. Has anyone else had problems with their CD that has the general plan on it? No? Well, please let me know right away. If you hadn't looked at it already, please do so and shoot me an email, and I'll get everyone who's having problems new CDs. Sorry.
So the best way to explain the general plan is a book. And each chapter in that book is what we call an element. So here's your general plan now, well-worn. You can see Katie's been doing her job. And you can see that there are chapters in here. Each chapter, there's circulation, open space. Those are what's called the elements. And those elements are topics that the law requires us to address. And you have a copy of the law. We've also talked about other chapters we want to put in the plan. And we did that at last meeting, I think. And those will be what we're calling additional elements. Okay? So a chapter is an element. Now, the reason I'm pointing you to this paper is that these elements, frankly, are, in some cases, they can be very dry. Dry would be a word. Cut and dry. You know, you have to talk about public buildings. You have to talk about open space. You have to talk about how many gallons per capita of water you're going to use, and tell us how you're going to secure additional supplies for population growth. But when you take these elements and put them together, they begin to draw a picture of the community. And to kind of create the bigger picture, the bigger topic, and to help people understand how these elements are connected, the staff has organized the elements into what we're going to call the sections of the plan. And that's how, with the General Plan Committee, we want to go forward to address the general plan. Instead of only talking, for example, about water resources, because that has to do with the environment and sustainability and how we use water. And water is related to energy, because you need to heat water, and all these kinds of things. We're kind of trying to group these topics into related sections. And so here are the sections of the plan, and the way each of these sections, you'll see them shown on this sheet. Okay? And this is what we're going to be doing over the next few months. So when you say to Katie, when are we going to talk about light rail? The law tells us that light rail goes in the transportation section, right? So we have to talk about light rail under,
Section 3.
and this is a bad one because that's a whole other topic, but we'll just go with it for now. We have to put transportation.
Section
Right
3.
there. We'll have transit listed.
It's, okay, transportation is its own section. It's a transportation element, but that's what we'll be talking about. If someone says, when are we going to talk about healthy communities? Sorry, I'm going to pick on that one. That one could possibly go under parks and open space, but it also might go under healthy eating, healthy living, which is a chapter we wanted in the plan. So those are the areas under that community characters when we'd be talking about it. So that'll begin to help each of you find out when we're going to be addressing some of the issues that you in particular are concerned about. Right? Okay. So just kind of walk us through where we're at. So now I'm just going to take a step back and talk about the element. Right? What's an element? What does this chapter have to have in it? Well, the law actually tells us what each chapter has to have in it. And the law is ARS 9461.5. You've got a copy of the law. There's a lot of elements, so I'm not going to go through each one. But basically, in a nutshell, in each element, for each general plan required element, not for the ones we're making up, not making up, it's the ones we're choosing to add, but for the required elements, typically they say you have to summarize the current conditions. You don't have a choice about it. You need to include specific standards for the future conditions. So, for example, for parks, it might be level of service. For transportation, it might be level of service. For water, it might be gallons per capita, level of service. But it's a level of service standard. For land use, those standards are density and intensity. You have to have those standards. And then you have to have policies that guide the city actions. And the policies are what you're going to help the city develop, and some of the standards. Some of the standards are going to be set. For example, the city probably has, and I'm guessing on this so I might get corrected, a water standard, but they project so many gallons per day of water use. We might have a policy that says we want to be more environmentally sustainable. We're going to work towards lowering that standard. But it's unlikely that we'll establish a new standard in the plan because there's a lot of stuff with it. But if we want to lower that standard, and that's a policy, we might suggest things like, and I'm making this up, so please don't think I'm saying it's a good idea. No one can have grass. You can't wash your car in your driveway. Whatever these things might be, those are just ways of, those would be the things you'd say to staff, these are the kinds of things we want to see in our plan. And then the staff will turn that into an element, goals and policies that become an element. So that's what we're talking about when we have an element. Does that make sense to people? Go ahead.
We recommend policies. Who actually approves them? Does city council approve them?
Right, you're going to approve them first, because you're going to, the staff's going to, you're going to say, why aren't we doing stuff like, I'll pick solar, for example. Why doesn't everybody have solar on their roof? We think that should happen. Okay, so now Katie knows that you're really interested in rooftop solar. She's going to go back, maybe look through ordinances, look through law, see there are ways that maybe if we can't require it of new development, we can encourage it in existing and in old. Those ideas will come back to you in the form of general plan policies. You guys will look at them. Some of them might be draconian. Maybe Katie says every house is going to have to pay a $3,000 surcharge when they move in to have solar put on, every time there's a title transfer. Okay? See, I really can come up with some good ones. And you guys might say, George is going to say, what, are you kidding me? There's no way that's going to happen. We're not going to make people pay $3,000 on every title transfer. Well, that policy might come out. So that's the process that we're envisioning would happen. When you've got that plan document, it's going to have a couple of other things happen. It's going to have to go for a 60-day review to all the jurisdictions, to the state, the school districts. They're going to come back with ideas for Katie, and she'll probably bring those ideas back to you and say, for example, the state land department said that they want a policy in the plan that says we can have whatever zoning we want. You guys can think about it and say, well, maybe we'll give that to the state land department, maybe we won't. Then after you do that next review, it will also be reviewed by the public the same time it's a 60-day review. It'll go to the council. The council needs to have 2 hearings on the plan, and then it'll go to a vote. So those policies ultimately get approved by you, the voters. After they get laundered, put by you, the committee, examined and vetted by you, the community, and examined and vetted by you, the planning commission, and the council. Is that helping people get a little bit of a better idea of sort of what the structure of these chapters is going to have in it? Mm-hmm. Okay. You need to say no, because if not, I keep going, okay? So how are we going to make this happen? Well, we've talked a lot about it, and this is probably a presumption on my part, but in getting to know you, I've learned that a lot of you have really different ideas and report to you. Some of you are concerned about the city center. Some of you are concerned about transit. Some of you are concerned about parks and open space. And what we realized is that you have ideas that are good and are important, and this is your plan. So for each element or for each section, you can decide. What we'd like to do is enlist what we're calling idea champions. And so what you, as an idea champion, would do is at the beginning of each topical meeting, you're going to get up there and you're going to talk about why this is important to Goodyear and what Goodyear needs to do in the future. So I'm going to pick on healthy communities, if you don't mind, for a second, because that's an easy one. You're going to get up as an idea champion and first of all tell us what healthy communities are. A lot of people don't really understand that concept, right? Why does it matter to Goodyear? What are the kind of things Goodyear should be doing? That's a way of bringing in these new ideas, okay? We're only going to give you 10 minutes to do it because we don't want you here all night once a month. So you're going to have to, that's the homework. If you're an idea champion, you're going to be given that responsibility. There may be more than one idea champion. There may be idea champions. There may be an idea champion that says we need an unhealthy community. It's up to the 2 of you guys to figure out how to get those ideas out. You know, there could be a lot of downsides to a healthy community. Cost, let's say, to put in trails. Making up stuff. So that'll be at the beginning of the meeting. So that'll be one way. Then the next thing that we're going to do is have an expert in some areas. Whoops, sorry. The expert is someone like me. They're the boring people. And what we're going to do is deliver the facts. So Katie, for example, in water might have someone from the Water Resources Department to talk about gallons per capita, what the city's currently doing, what they've got on the books, what hasn't, things that they've looked at that have failed, things they've looked at that they're interested in. So then you get sort of the current conditions and kind of the operational perspective, right? And given that, then what my job will be to do is to facilitate a discussion in the same way we've had a lot of these discussions. We'll write it down, we'll put it on boards, we'll have exercise. What's important for Goodyear to address in this area? What are the things that are important? So some of the ideas might be big ideas and some might be little. And the reason we're thinking this might be a process that would work for you is, one, if you have a passion, let's say you feel that there used to be a dog park in every single park in Goodyear, and it needs to be a divided dog park, okay? And that's why you're on this committee, because gosh darn it, when you get off this committee, that general plan is going to show you where every dog park is in Goodyear. There are going to be two of them, one for big dogs and little dogs, okay? You're going to have your opportunity to stand up in front of this committee and tell them why it's important and give them your idea. And it may happen that this whole committee says, you know, I get it, I understand it, but it's not that important. They also might say, oh my gosh, you are right. This is the most important. But it's your opportunity as someone with a passion to present those ideas. It's also the city's opportunity to present their ideas and get support for directions they'd like to move. And so you asked what your role is. That's your role, is you're that very first screen of getting those ideas into the hopper. Now, your job as a committee member is really important too. One of the things Katie did was give you, in the back of your handout, ideas that we got from the public meeting. Now, we've done some work to summarize that. And so, for example, and she'll tell you kind of how many people talked about it, what some of the topics are, and we have the whole list, right, of comments?
Yeah.
And we actually have the whole list of comments. And as a committee member, it's your job to kind of sort through that stuff as well. And bring forward what you feel is important. As an idea champion, it's your idea to sort through that stuff as well and bring forward what's important. So that's sort of how we kind of wanted to move forward and move through the process. So kind of operationally, how would we make it work? Kind of, I said this already. The first kind of 2/3 of every meeting, we're going to talk about the section. So I'm just going to pick April 9th. Okay? The discussion topic is going to be neighborhoods and character. If you look on your thing,
We're going to do 1 and 4.
Oh, the discussion is neighborhoods and
neighborhoods and housing. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So, I'm
Might
sorry,
be
I misread
backwards.
it. Neighborhoods and housing is April 9th.
The chapter.
Okay, that's the bigger chapter. The elements that we'll work on is the general plan requirement for an element neighborhood preservation and revitalization. We're going to have an education element that you chose and a housing element. So those will be the topics that we discuss. So anybody that cares about housing or any of the parts of those elements, that's your meeting as an idea champion. We'll probably have some experts presenting about housing to you. Then we're going to say kind of what do we want to have happen in the future? What is our desired future for housing? Do we want, I'll throw out some ideas, multifamily, mixed-use housing? Do we want retail over commercial? Do we want to continue with the same subdivisions we've always had? Do we want to put housing in places we haven't put it before? What about historic preservation? Some of your stock is going to be hitting 50. What do we want to do? And there's a future there that you're going to tell staff that you want. What do we want this place to look like? Long term. And then how are we going to do it? Maybe you feel we need to have a new historic preservation ordinance. Maybe we need to identify places for high-rises. Maybe we need to identify places where there will be no high-rises. But that's to tell staff that's the direction. And they're going to take all that stuff back, go back to their desk, work really hard over the next month, and then bring you back a draft element. So does that work for you? Does that seem like a logical, kind of organized way? Really? Yes? No? Any questions? Any problems?
Do you see there's some overlap with some of the issues? With neighborhoods is more than just those three things. We probably incorporate some other elements with that, or some of the subsections under the element.
There's, when you do a general plan, it's almost impossible to separate out everything. Sometimes there's overlapping in goals and policies. You may be discussing things twice. And that's the area where I think, what you can just say to staff, you need to make sure it links to. Mm-hmm. We already talked about that here. We want to make sure we support that. A really good example might be trails and parks and rec and transit. because you have to walk to get to transit. What do you walk on? You walk on a trail and a sidewalk. Well, sidewalk is transportation, trail goes to Parks and Rec. Right? So you want to make sure that they're mutually supportive. That, I think, is the job that staff will take on. But as a committee, too, you can say, we want to reinforce it. You know, she could do it all sorts of ways. She could do a call-out box, references the other elements. So that can happen. And that'll, I think, as we begin to develop the elements, begin to take more shape. But yes, there is going to be overlap.
And it's a work in progress. If we start writing, you know, I put water resources and infrastructure. So as we start writing it, we say, wait a minute, this is all environmental stuff. We need to move this entire section over. We can make that decision, and it's no problem.
A point of order, if, just so that the audience can hear us, we're all kind of pointed towards one another. Would everyone speak into a microphone, please, when talking so they can hear us? Thank you.
Oh, what's the, on this outline, some of these are underlined and some are not. And then if you look at the required elements from the Growing Smarter thing, you know, two-thirds of these are identified in these required elements, but where did you come up with the rest of them? Is that through stuff we talked about, or?
Great question, and I should have had a little key on there. All the underlined ones are the ones we came up with, and we came up with that last meeting. We brainstormed and put them on those giant Post-it notepads, and so I tried to figure out a best fit of what sections those could fit under so we don't forget about those key topics. I might have chose the wrong section, and we can move them around, but just so we don't forget about them. But they're not required. We may decide to take some of those out. We don't need to address that after all. But yeah, if it's not underlined, it's required.
If it's not underlined, it's required. Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Jose?
Just two issues. One is, you mentioned in the process that the experts will be brought in after the members express goals for achievement.
Oh, no, I didn't do a good job then.
Okay.
My thinking is, and I should have even said more, and we've been talking about this, so thank you for bringing that up. If you volunteer as an idea champion, we're going to tell you that as soon as we have it, oh, by the way, you're also going to be working with Sam Smith, that's the expert. You're going to come in together. You have access to that expert while you develop your ideas. That expert might tell you places to look for ideas. So you're not against each other, you're a team.
Okay, yeah.
You're a team.
That's important clarification because in order to come up with new ideas, you know, any of the members here need to know some of that expertise and also know the status in quantifiable matters or indexes.
Right, and part of what we're trying to do is, you know, there's two parts of it. We'd like the experts, let them deal with the details. Let them deal with the 4.729. And, you know, we can do this only if the right-of-way has this many feet in it because we're going to be 2 feet short if we... But the heck with that. That's their problem, okay? But what we'd like to see you say, let's just say, go back to streets, is say, you know, I'm the transportation expert. I'm really interested in non-motorized transportation. And I read about this great idea called Complete Streets, where everybody can use any transportation mode on any street. And this is what it means. Now, if that's an idea you want to move forward in the general plan, that is an idea you should move forward.
Okay, you are.
Okay, so that's, I'm trying to make you guys, you don't need to be professionals. You need to be champions of an idea.
Right, so they have to work together. Okay,
Yeah.
the second item is almost related to the issue that he mentioned, the underlying topics in the outline. You know, it may be that after any of the members discusses with the expert any specific matter, that this may change, like sustainability may be a major topic that it may involve all the elements completely, integrating cost, life expectancy, or benchmarking. So that will evolve during the process.
Yeah, and what I expect is when we talk about land use and growth, we're going to talk about the big topic as a committee of land use and growth. Katie is going to take all those ideas back and break them out into the elements and sort what needs to be where. You know what I mean? So when we talk about land use and growth. We'll be talking big picture, a lot of different things, what we'd like to see for the future. We may have some very specific things we want to talk about. I know, for example, I don't think he's here, but I mean, moving the city center came up at one of the meetings, right? That might be a specific topic we talk about. But, you know, we're not going to sit there and say, on this corner we're putting this, and that's sort of not what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to the big topics, and then Katie will take it back, and this is where, you know, what you pay her for, frankly. You know, she's a planner, make some sense of it, and create the general plan elements. And so take your ideas and your thoughts and your visions for the future and turn that into actions for the city and specific goals to accomplish. So, and then that's the second review that you get. So now you gave her direction about what you want to see. She kind of turns it into specific things. You then look at those specific things and say, you got it, or, oh my gosh, you missed the boat on this one, girlfriend. You know? And so that's how that's going to have to go. But I think we're trying to get a structured process because we do have a limited time here. And we do have to move through the process. And so this is a way we thought that if we organized each meeting this way, you would know what to expect. We could move through the process. I expect the first couple meetings are going to be a little bit squishy until we kind of get to figure it out for ourselves. This is a new idea. I've never done this with a group before either. But I think that, you know, we can do it. And I think you guys are truthfully committed enough and together enough and such a great team that we can make it work.
Thank you, Leslie. We have a few more questions here. Peter Fine.
Oh my gosh, the things. The other thing is people were going to raise their hands, so I guess the turning the things sideways wasn't working. That's okay. I'll go either way, whatever you want.
Does this mean we're going to review last month's agenda item at the end of the meeting then?
You will be reviewing, and I haven't gotten to that slide, yes, the elements or the section that you created at the prior meeting after the discussion of the new element at the last third of the meeting. And here's the slide that says that. Ta-da! So the second 1/3, it should be the third, my mistake, is you overview the general plan element from the meeting that's provided by staff. We go through it. And so that's another part of your homework. If you're not an idea champion, we're going to ask you to read that element before you come to the meeting. And those meetings are not wordsmith meetings. They're not like, oh, shouldn't it be it's with an apostrophe? That's not what we're looking for. You know, we're looking for, you missed this idea wasn't included. We need to move forward this concept. We don't think you said this strongly enough. You know, we're not going to, I mean, some of it will be wordsmithing, but you know what I mean? We really want to look at these elements and make sure it reflects what you want. And this won't be the last time you see it, but this will get us to a working element that can help us create the draft. Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Another question?
Yes. How soon can you have the accessibility to the subject matter experts so that you can start working on those ideas? For instance, the example you used in that it's April 9th, education, right? Well, we don't want to wait a month before because they may not have the availability, they may not have the resource. So, how soon can we start doing that?
When we get the idea champ, we're going to kind of start as of tonight. We want to make sure you're comfortable with the idea of an idea champion. Once we get that, we'll begin to enlist the experts. I might add one of the reasons we don't want you to have more than 10 minutes, which is a huge chunk of time. So hopefully it's less than 10, but no more than 10 is, you know, this isn't a thesis for you guys. This is just ideas. You know, you can do as much research as you want, but it's more just floating ideas that you think would be good for us to talk about as a committee. And it may even be that you say, you know, we're liking this idea, but we still haven't had enough time to talk about it. Katie will look and do more research into it. Maybe put some stuff into goals. Maybe she'll have alternates. You know, we can go this way or this way when she brings back.
And can I add, too, that some of these ideas, I'm going to be really relying on some of the idea champions to help me identify and enlist experts. Some of them are really easy for me. They're city staff, and I just call them and tell them when they need to be there, and you know, like water resources. But something like education, I don't really work closely with the schools. I don't have children. You know, if there's someone who wants to take on education as an idea champion, and they know the president of the PTA, well, then please volunteer and you call them and you get them in here to talk about what we need to hear about from education. And so that's, to me, one of the jobs. You know, and even if you're like, I'm not going to talk, I'm going to give this expert my 10 minutes because I think you need to hear from the PTA rather than me, that's fabulous. So I'm going to be looking to you guys to help us find those experts in some areas.
And things to think about are what can the city do to move forward? What might there be in terms of partnerships? What are we missing the boat on? What are some of the areas that we're not thinking about? You know, just big picture things. You know, you drive around one day and you say, why aren't they doing this? You know, has anybody thought of that? And this is the time to put that into our group and to give it an opportunity to see the light of day. I'm not guaranteeing everybody will support your ideas or the ideas of your experts, but I think it's a fair way to give them their day in court. One more, go ahead.
What I'm not seeing or understanding in your plan for proceeding is any reference to the plans that already exist. And are we just going to start with a clean slate and have 25 people throw out ideas? Or are we going to look at the plan that's in place and say, what do we keep, what do we change, what do we take out, what do we re-emphasize?
You know, that's a really good point and a great comment. My vision was that as an idea expert, you would be able to stand up there and say, we think we're doing a lot of good. We like the current plan. The city experts will also tell you what they're doing currently. And much of that is directed by the general plan. But you also might say there's some other things we should be doing. So it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's kind of saying, here's the bathwater. We're okay with the bathwater as it is, except we don't like the soap. You know what I mean? So maybe this was a bad idea in the old plan. Let's take that one out, and here's another idea. But it's certainly not to jettison what was, but to get us to look back and see if we like what's there, and also what more should we bring forward. You know, you might be an idea expert in public buildings. Let's just say that's your thing. You know, you really care about where maintenance yards are. You could stand up and say, you know, I looked at the maintenance yard plan, and I think it's really great. The only thing I wonder about is as we grow, are we going to need to put more maintenance yards in South Goodyear? And that could be the end of your thing. You might say, oh my gosh, I figured out a new way that they can manage maintenance yards from a central location and do equipment analysis. You know, I don't know. But so that's, you know what I mean, just these ideas. Katie's not going to throw out the plan. And there is stuff that's going to stay the same. And that's not the intent. The current city experts will also bring forward information about plans that exist, that are guiding you. Like, for example, the transportation master plan that's being updated, or the Parks and Rec master plan that's being updated. So those things exist, and we're not going to jettison that at all.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the land use. And hopefully, I think I agree, that's a really great concern. And hopefully we kind of run through this example of the land use and we can see how it works with that too. And then if you don't feel that's enough, we can talk about how we can work on that more and improve that part.
So what I think we want to do now, I think that's the end of my these slides. Yeah. So I think what we could do is, and I leave it to you, Mr. Chairman, you guys can either email Katie. It's a lot to think about, you know, step up and volunteer. It's a responsibility. If you don't want to be an idea champion, that's fine. We'll just have an expert. We're not anticipating every topic we'll have an idea champion. But if there is ideas, or there are ideas that you want to bring forward, or topics that you're particularly interested in that you'd like to discuss with the committee, this is how we think would be a great idea to proceed to do it. You could either say now, or I guess within the next week or so. Would that be fair? Mm-hmm. Tell us, Katie, no via email. Is that acceptable to you? Does that seem like a reasonable way to proceed? Anybody think it's
Jose?
destined for failure?
Just very quick, Mr. Chairman, since it was mentioned for this, I'm wondering if this is the proper time to request that the city provide an official, quantifiable status of the accomplishments from the goals of the 2003 master plan, general plan. so we will know, you know, as an overall picture, maybe a 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes, but an action item for them or Kelly, you know, who will have that handle, you know, so we know what was accomplished, what was not,
Has everyone had a chance to look at the 2003 general plan? Everyone? Okay. Because like my disc didn't work, but it's online, and I pulled it up online and read through the majority of it that way. So that's important. I think we need to do individually at home, call it homework or whatever, but familiarize ourselves with the plan that's in place right now. And then from that point forward, what do we want to do with our plan?
one company's plan does not state what was accomplished or not. Just the goals and the planning, but nothing else. What I was asking is, you know, what was accomplished or not, or put in the parking lot or whatever.
State law requires at the end or the beginning of every year that each jurisdiction give a report on the extent to which they accomplished the goals of the plan. Those reports, what we'll do is put them all online.
Yeah, they actually are online now under the current general plan page. If you go to the website and go to the 2003 general plan.
I think that we could do
They
a
are.
quick summary at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
but I think that's a great idea to do a summary.
The macro, you know,
Yeah.
picture.
And, what was the other thing?
Well, and we do have next meeting, hopefully. We still have that existing conditions report coming. So I'm sorry, we're working diligently to get that finished up.
And so that will also get on the web for you guys to look at. So that'll give you an idea of sort of where we are. I saw another card standing up there.
Leslie, would you envision a way which, let's say, 2 or 3 people would like to be a champion for a particular topic? How would you envision that they work together, or how do you think that might work?
Yeah, they would work together. The question was if there are 2 or 3 champions for a topic. I don't expect everybody's going to have the same ideas. You know, you're going to have look, you know, my way is always right? You know? So obviously everybody's going to have their own ideas about what's important or what might not be important. First of all, it's a big tent. The general plan has lots of goals and policies. There are lots of different ways to go about something. So what I'd hope is that the idea champions would get together, and if you either want to do a joint discussion, you want to each just divide up the time, however you want to do it, that part's up to you. You know, you work together, you're a committee, form a team, you do that. I think what we just want to make sure as we move through the process and we set up the structure for the process is that each person has that opportunity to express those ideas that are important to them. Because frankly, that's why you're on the committee. Care about the future. And if it's generic stuff, we'll figure out a way to get the generic stuff discussed. So that's why I say if you want to email Katie and just say, you know, I'm really, you know, interested in the Gila River, and I want to talk about that and how that could benefit our community. We'll find a place for that.
On a practical standpoint, how about if you email me an idea that you want to champion and you're open to working with others if they want to work on that same idea, let me know. And then when I'll put a whole list of everything everybody signed up for, and if you've told me, yeah, I'm open to working with others, I'll put your email address so that other people know, oh, these other people are open and I can email them and we can start chit-chatting. Does that kind of work? So I know these 3 people are doing it too. Okay.
So are we comfortable with this idea champion thing then, or are we good with it? Is anyone okay? Are we missing any ways in this process for people to, you know, are we prohibiting or shutting down anyone, or do you think this will give all of us an opportunity to vet our thoughts? Okay, I'm glad to hear that. All right, so that's kind of that approach and that topic, and what I'm going to strongly encourage you to do is to email Katie by Friday. We're going to start assigning as of, you know, Monday. So you volunteer, that's your volunteer. It doesn't mean that as we go forward you can't volunteer, but the faster you can volunteer, the sooner we can get you to your champion, your experts, we can get it organized and we can get rolling. Because once this starts happening, it's going to happen. So think about it. And if you don't want to volunteer as an idea champion, that's okay. There is no harm in that. You know, we know we're asking you to give a lot up one night a month. Frankly, it's a lot. And the reading, and so it is a lot. So don't feel like you have to do that. But if you have a passion and you want to do it, we would love it. And, you know, there's a couple people in the audience that are coming that are citizens, and I'm going to kind of put myself out on a limb here. But I think if you wanted to support those idea champions or be part of that, I don't think there's anything wrong with your working or supporting those people as well. Because, you know, this is about the community. The more ideas, the better. And, you know, we're trying to create as many venues for you to get your ideas out there as possible. So don't feel you're locked out. We're requesting you lock in, so to speak.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so we start these discussions, idea champions in the blue blocks here, or the green blocks?
Let's see.
The review or the discussion of the topic?
The blue one.
So the first one will be January 8th, that's why we're talking about it today.
Except not
Right. That meeting is not where we're starting. Okay, we're going to start in February.
February meeting is the first idea
Yeah.
champions, everything's rolling.
Sorry, the land use plan's mine. Only my ideas count.
And it's executive right there is executive BS, okay? But, you know, again, I would say Katie is the idea champion for the land use plan, but, you know, this is where she's going to put it out there, and you guys are going to have a field day with her. So we're actually going to start that discussion a little bit tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other places that I'm leaving empty or blank? Is everyone kind of getting a better feel of where we're going?
And if you want to champion an idea not on the outline, send it to me. That's fine. We'll add it in.
Cool.
Thank you, Leslie.
You guys.
And that's a great segue into Katie Wilkin will
No.
give us a
Not yet.
presentation. Not yet?
And
Okay.
I was going to
Oh,
start.
now we got to do the
Well, I'll start it out. I'm going to start it out by stealing Leslie's presentation, actually.
Oh, not this one.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to remind you, you might have remembered that at the first meeting we talked, you know, I showed you this pyramid and showed you how we have our general plan and then master plans and all these other plans start filling in. Well, we're finally talking about it. We've told you a little bit before, but we have two master planning efforts that are going on at the same time as the general plan. Our transportation master plan and our parks and recreation master plan. And although this is going to take a lot of work and coordination, it's such a fantastic opportunity because really, besides the land use plan, I think transportation and parks are our two biggest topics that the community wants to talk about and cares about and takes a lot of planning for the future. So it's such a great opportunity for us to think about our goals and then we could start implementing them through these master plans. So this is what I stole from Leslie, that Leslie talks about all the time, is we have this general plan and the state requires certain things be in that general plan. And now we're going to have our transportation master plan and parks and recreation master plan we're doing at the same time. And there's some overlap, but then there's some things that are going to be in the master plans themselves. And so just as some quick examples, you know, the roadway classification plan belongs in both the general plan and the transportation plan. But the transportation plan is also going to include a lot of details, like level of service data and roadway functioning data. The general plan and the parks and recreation plan, you know, we have to have an inventory and an analysis of our needs with regards to parks. But then the parks plan is going to take it further and talk about detailed level of service and what's actually in the parks. You know, is it a pool? Is it a playground? That's the kind of detail that we're going to go with the parks and recreation master plan. So what we're trying to do as we do this is really keep our focus to those overlap areas and make sure we don't start going on tangents, even though it's easy to do, into the detail that needs to be in the master plan, but doesn't need to be part of the general plan. And that's mostly just to save us time, since we have so many topics to cover. Then, so first we're going to talk a little bit more about the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and I'm going to let Leslie do that.
The Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as Katie said, by state law, we're required to deal with a couple things. One, open space, and discuss the open space needs and project those needs, talk about how we're going to meet them. And then the parks element, it's facilities and standards. But the Parks and Recreation Master Plan also does a lot of other things. It talks about programming and events, which is a huge component of Parks and Recreation now. It's going to talk about maintenance standards, which is a huge cost item, and it reflects back on the number of parks that you build and the facilities that you have. Your programming also drives your facilities. It's going to identify your cost for future land acquisition, number of acres you're going to need, types of parks you're going to need, service areas, and then financing strategies. Whoops. I keep on doing bad things there. So, yeah, sorry guys. So, one of the things is there's, where do we interface with you? In the case of the Parks and Rec Master Plan, that plan is being guided by the Parks and Recreation Commission, which was just newly appointed. So they're going to work with you on the plan. Can I talk about the Transportation Master Plan?
Yeah.
Conversely, the Transportation Master Plan is going to be led by a subcommittee of this committee. And that subcommittee could just have one person from this committee on it. It could be totally independent people from this committee, but it's still going to be called a subcommittee of this committee. Okay? So partly, going back to idea champions, maybe if you're the transportation idea champion, you want to be on the Parks and on the Transportation Subcommittee. Maybe not, because it's another set of meetings, but not as many as this. The other time is that we are going to have a public workshop. We'd like to try to somehow coordinate that with some of the transportation plan workshops and the general plan workshops. We're trying not to make Goodyear citizens go to 3 separate sets of process meetings. We are going to do focus groups as part of this process. We're probably going to work with the Transportation Master Plan to see if there's overlap there. The Parks and Rec Plan has in it a survey for funding and financing, but you guys are going to start Mind Mixer, so we're going to try and take advantage of Mind Mixer. We're going to have an open house to present the plan. We expect that we'll be able to coordinate with the general plan open houses. I don't know why I have 2 general plan updates. Oh, and we're going to update the general plan committee twice, so that the Parks and Rec Plan will officially come here and tell you this is where we're at. Here's our big picture goals. We want your feedback, and probably update you on the plan. And that will happen toward the end of the process. So are just over the top quick areas of interface where I see, just the general plan interacting with the Parks and Rec Plan. And I guess I should also say to you that my firm was fortunate enough to be selected as the consultant to lead the development of the Parks and Rec Plan. So, but the areas of interface that I'm seeing right now, which is why I say I, are the trails. Trails are really important. There probably is going to be a trails map in the Parks and Rec Plan. We may put that in the general plan. It may be a decision to make. Open space, to me, it's where not to develop. We really want, and also how do we deal with that in master plan communities? How do we deal with the provision of parks? What role do parks have? Healthy communities is a huge area of interface in terms of programming and policy for parks. And then also the role of parks in economic development, community character, and in future development. Do we want urban parks? Things like that. Linear parks. How do we deal with Bullard Wash, the Gila River? There's places where we're going to talk about both those things in both plans. And we want to make sure everybody's coordinated. So that would be the Parks and Rec Plan, where we see interface and how it's working.
So, and I'm sorry, there was some, the engineering department is going to be taking on the task of the Transportation Master Plan. They are hiring a consultant who is going to oversee that entire process, and they're still in contract negotiations, so they can't be here tonight. But just to go back to this little chart and reiterate, so as Leslie had said, we have the General Plan Committee to oversee the creation of the General Plan. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee is going to oversee the creation of the Parks plan. And they're going to be a standing committee from now on, so it's kind of like their first task is overseeing their plan, but this is going to be a committee that exists just like the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Arts and Culture Commission. So then the question is, well, how do we have somebody looking at the transportation master plan? So that's what staff thought about this. Engineering and planning staff have been talking a lot about this. And this is where we came up with the idea of possibly having a subcommittee of this group take that task on. And to tell you a little bit more about the plan, the areas of interface is the roadway classification plan. And that basically is where we say this road is an arterial road, and an arterial road is this much feet of right-of-way, and it includes a median or not. That's what that is. And it's actually very up-to-date. Transportation planning is slightly different because so much of it is done regionally. There's these larger plans that we look to, and so we actually just updated that plan in 2009 because Maricopa Association of Governments, or MAG, had done some regional planning for a lot of the proposed expressways, like the 303 and the I-10 bypass and some of those. So we've been doing a lot of that already. Our transit plan would be something that mixes in, and of course transit is the same way. That's a lot of that planning is done regionally. And then, as I said, kind of the road classifications and street cross-sections fit into that. Now, the engineering department identified these items as what they need help from a subcommittee that's kind of too detailed for this group to start getting into. And that's in particular on-street bike lanes. And as Leslie said, Parks is taking care of trails, and that's kind of how we split it. Parks would take care of off-street trails. The transportation plan is going to take care of on-street bike lanes. Same other types of on-street pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, and sometimes there's multi-use pathways that follow right away. Specifically, the transportation needs between Estrella, the development of Estrella, not Estrella Parkway, and Patterson Road, because so much planning has been done in the northern part. That's an area of the city where the next phase of planning needs to happen. And then transit and truck routes is this little specific thing that we definitely want a subcommittee to weigh in on. So I think that's it. Okay. And just in general, with both the parks plan and the transportation plan, I just wanted to make the statement that basically from here on out, Goodyear 2025 refers to all three of these planning efforts. If we have a meeting for Goodyear 2025, staff is ready to talk about transportation planning, parks planning, and the general plan. And that's to make it easier. You know, there's no reason to have 3 different meetings on these different plans. We'll go out to the community and discuss them together. There might be specific little things each one does, like a stakeholder meeting or a focus group. That's a smaller type thing, but those big city meetings, we're working all together now. In February, you'll see at your schedule, that's when we're proposing to talk about the transportation plan and the parks plan. And we'll kind of be talking up at the 10,000-foot level still, just to get your general ideas. And this one is going to work a little differently. We're not going to come back the next meeting with the draft chapters. We're going to kind of let these planning efforts happen. So we're going to talk about what we want to make sure, these broad goals to help guide the creation of these master plans, that, hey, we have some specific issues we want to make sure these consultants and the Parks Committee knows about that affect our general plan. And then we'll let those draft master plans get written. And then once the master plans are written, I can then write a draft chapter that meets both the goals you identified and conforms to these master plans. And then I think it's in November of 2013 is when we have it scheduled to. That's when you'll be looking at the draft chapter. So those 2 particular chapters, there's this long time between you setting the goals and actually seeing the chapter. But there, as Leslie indicated, you're going to be receiving updates. We're going to be talking to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. There's going to be a transportation subcommittee that's going to be letting us know what's going on. So it's not that you're not going to hear about these transportation plans for 8 months. It's just kind of the nature of getting these master plans and chapters work together. So engineering's thought on this subcommittee is because of these specific things they want to address, is they want to try and get somebody to represent each of these bullet points. And the thought is the subcommittee won't be a 20-member subcommittee. They're trying to keep it 10 or under. And so I'm just gonna throw you on the spot, but I believe our engineering staff might have called Darren already. Darren
Yes.
was on, one of our committee members happens to work for, and I always get them all confused, but you work for Valley Metro.
We're now Valley Metro, yes.
Okay. So, he happens to work for the agency responsible for transit planning in our region, or Phoenix area.
Yep. Appropriate.
If he wasn't on our committee, we'd be reaching out to his organization to get him on this subcommittee anyway. So the fact that he happens to be on our general plan committee is the engineering staff thought this is a great person who can be on our subcommittee, give us that transit link, but then also link that subcommittee to this committee and provide updates back and forth. If there's anybody else who has a burning desire to talk about these issues, send me an email and I'll hook you up with the general, with the engineering department, and we'll go through the process of possibly putting you on that committee. We're thinking maybe a dozen meetings at most. I think that might be a lot. Half a dozen meetings. There's going to be a lot of stuff to read probably though, a lot of stuff to look through. But like I said, if you were just like, no, I really want to talk about truck routes. So send me an email and we'll talk about that. But so unless anybody has heartburn, we were already thinking that Darren could be one of our people on there.
Remember we did some of our projects.
Can I'll add one thing? Yes, engineering did contact me, and I did, I guess, graciously accept, or I threw in my willingness to serve on this committee. So I'll just throw it out there.
We appreciate that.
I guess just a comment, I didn't see any of the topics, economics, so there, you are there, economic sustainability.
That is a general plan topic. That is not, it's interesting, I'm glad you brought that up. That goes to the general plan. This is an operational, these master plans are operational plans. And so,
It goes into maintenance, economics is part of maintenance.
yeah, I don't think they're dealing with maintenance in this transportation master plan. I think it's more a future street and standard plan. It's not street maintenance, it's a different, they don't typically deal with that in the master plan.
Coming just sort of the engineering, from the engineering background, we always consider the economic sustainability of any project. At least in the macro picture, is it like a policy statement, you can have a grandiose idea, but if you don't have the economic cycle or life cycle of the project, it's not a viable project.
I think you need to be on the transportation committee.
Sounds like we have another volunteer to champion transportation. And then, Katie, is it my understanding that after Darren makes one of these meetings or a few of them, he'll report back to us at kind of where they're going?
Yeah, I think we'll trust Darren to use his judgment
Okay.
on what you think the larger group wants to hear about. Because there's gonna be detailed stuff that I'm not even gonna want to know. But, so we'll just rely on him to, think of that. And also while he's in the subcommittee meeting, thinking, they need to know this thing that the general plan committee brought up while they were talking about land
Right.
use, because it's gonna affect us. So that's kind of his job, is to work both ways. And just to let you know how this works, according to our bylaws, subcommittees are not formal. We don't need a formal vote to approve them. We just wanted to let you know about this, so you know exactly what's going on, and so anyone could raise red flags if they can think of any serious problems with us using this method. Also, just to let you know, if you have a burning desire to be on this subcommittee, but otherwise, we're going to work. The subcommittee says that the chair can appoint members to a subcommittee. They don't have to be part of the larger committee to be on the subcommittee. So staff is going to work with Chuck over the next month on how we build the subcommittee with the engineering department. And then once we have them in place, we'll report back to you and let you know who is appointed to that, when their meetings are. These meetings are going to be open to the public, so if any of you don't want to be on the subcommittee but want to attend the meetings to see what's going on, you'd be welcome to. Would you like to add anything, or any of you? Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of the old days when you were more involved in transportation.
Katie, can you kind of explain to everyone why we sort of took the champions approach as as opposed to forming 20 subcommittees to address every element?
Yeah, there's some cities that create a bunch of subcommittees, and I didn't want to have to attend a bunch of subcommittee meetings.
Because subcommittees have to hold meetings.
You know what?
And
There was
minutes.
actually a lot of thought about it, and the idea of creating champions as opposed to creating subcommittees, there is a couple of real operational reasons. You know, as soon as you create another body, that body takes on its own personality. And we don't really want to create, what we want to do is keep everybody working together. We don't want to pit them in different groups. And I also, so as we kind of talked through this, we thought it was the most expeditious. Also, we're trying to be respectful of your time. And this way, it's a lot more flexible in terms of how your time is used. The amount of time you want to choose. If you're a champion and you want to spend 30 seconds on your topic, you got one thing you want to say it. We're good. You know, you don't have to do that. The time limit is so that you're forced in a funny way to identify what's most important, and it does allow the committee enough time to talk through not only your ideas, but ideas they want to move forward from the existing plan and ideas they may want to not move forward from the existing plan as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you open to us recommending other people outside this committee to be,
Okay. All right. You're easy. Are we ready to move on?
Now we'll receive a presentation from Katie Wilkin on the land use plan.
Okay. This is big. This is the start of us actually doing some work on the general plan. And I know I'm going to get some nervousness from this side of the room over here, our development representative. But first, before I delve into the land use plan itself, I sent you something on land use and growth in the agenda packet, but then today at your place, I had this paperclip land use and growth packet. And this is this is a work in progress, but this is an example. The month before we discuss a topic, so say, next month was the month we were going to talk about housing in neighborhoods. The month before at the meeting, I'm going to give you a packet like this with everything you need to be prepared for the next meeting. And you can see the first page is recommended review. The first line, essential reading. I expect everyone to have read this stuff and gone through it. It's not hard, it's simple stuff, it won't take you that long. But I will conduct the next meeting, having assumed that you've all read that. The next section, recommended readings, is just that. If you're interested in the topic and you really want to look through it, then, these are some of the things I would prioritize first above other things. The additional reading section, it's not stuff I necessarily expect you to read. It's more, a lot of it's going to be plans and studies that I just want to make sure that we remember are out there. There might be a couple pieces we want to pull from it, but I don't expect anyone to sit through and read the Luke Air Force Base land use planning document, which is probably going to take too long. Don't bother with that. The next section that's not on this particular one that I can add is reading suggested by the idea champion. So for those of you who want to take on the topic and you say, I read this really great article that explains everything I want to say, and that way I don't have to give a presentation next time, just hand out this article for me. I'd be happy to do it. Just, of course, be respectful of others' time. If it's a 2-page article that says what you want to say, that'd be great, and I'll include it. So then the next, if you go to the next page, and I have the summary sheet. And kind of this is the cheat sheet of things you need to know about the chapter. So I included a very short purpose, the elements that are required to be part of this chapter. And then I actually just pulled word for word the requirements from Arizona state statute. You do have the statute in your binder, but just to remind us on these particular elements, this is what we're required to do. And then this is, I hope, starts getting at some of Mark's concerns. But I did include a how is it addressed in the current I only included the goals and policies. I don't think we necessarily needed the introductory text and the data, especially since a lot of that's going to be outdated since it's 10 years old now. But this is kind of your starting point, and I would expect before the meeting you kind of read through these and each of you kind of mentally say, you know, I kind of like what that goal is getting at. We should probably think about including it again, or that goal just, I don't think that's relevant anymore. Maybe we should think about stretching it out. So you kind of come to the meeting thinking already of, what in the current plan are you thinking we might want to include or not include. And then finally, on the back, I myself just kind of outlined some of the key issues for that chapter that we want to think about. So for example, for land use and growth, the land use plan is huge. It's one of the most important parts of the general plan itself, at least one of the most used portions. A key issue is going to coordinate with the Air Force Base and the Arizona State Land Department. We're required to do so. We've probably all heard there's changes at Luke Air Force Base. State land, there's been some changes in law regarding state land planning too. So that's going to be a key issue for us, is getting them involved and working with them. And then, I just put on their cost of development. There's been some changes to impact fees that are big. And so that's going to be another thing we're going to have to think about with cost of development. How does impact fee changes are going to affect the general plan. I've also listed for you relevant plans and studies. Again, that's almost for me more than it is for you, just so we remember what plans are out there that are either affecting the general plan or the general plan might affect. I listed the stakeholders, and since I'm giving this to you months before, this is one of the parts I'd love for you guys to look over and say, you forgot this group of people that you want to make sure that you include in this topic. And that's also to help our stakeholders, so hopefully they can look at these and know, oh, this is a meeting I probably want to be at, because they identified that, I'm somebody who's probably going to be really affected by this chapter. And then finally, ideas and comments identified during GAIN and the visioning workshop. So all the comments we've received, I've just divided them what I thought, what chapters they went with best, because then you can start digesting all these comments a little easier rather than me giving you the 15 pages of comments that we've received so far. So like I said, that's kind of a work in progress. So if there's additional information, especially as we go through that, you're thinking that we really need to have this information before we start discussing these topics, let me know and I can look at trying to get this. You'll see on the recommended readings list, I did include the chapter of the existing conditions report, which you do not have yet. And you are going to get that at the January meeting. And so then you'll have the existing conditions report. And then again, it's going to be a long document, so I don't see you sitting down and reading it all in one sitting, but you can read it as we need that information before the meetings. Okay, so does anyone have any comments on that? Does that make sense to everybody, just this handout? Great. Now we're going to talk about land use planning. Don't read ahead, but the first plan you have is the land use plan as amended from the current general plan. I'm going to reference it. So, we talked about this a little bit at the first meeting, but I just want to go over this again because I just think it's really important for us to understand this before we move forward. That's land use versus zoning. The land use map you have before you it's just a plan. It's our plan. We try and designate the highest and best future use of land through this land use plan. It may happen, it may not happen. And it's, again, as the name implies, it's just a general distribution of location. Whereas the zoning ordinance, as the name implies, is an ordinance. It's actual regulation of not just the land, but buildings, signs, everything you might do on that property. And it's parcel specific. Every parcel has a designation. To give you a super brief summary of the development process, if only it was this easy. Whenever somebody comes in wanting to develop a piece of property, whether they want to open up a business in an already existing building or they want to build a new building on a piece of land, the first thing planners ask is this property zoned for the use? If it is, they can move forward with whatever process they need to go through to build the building or occupy the building. If the answer is no, they need a rezone. So just as an example, somebody wants to build a grocery Grocery stores are allowed in the general commercial zoning district, so if it's zoned general commercial, they can move forward with site plans and construction documents and all that good stuff. If it's zoned agricultural, they have to go and ask for a rezone. So the first thing we do when we're thinking about a rezone is this is where the general plan comes into play. Is if somebody's asking to rezone a piece of property, we say, is the proposed zoning in conformance with the general plan? If it is, they can go forward with the zoning process. If it's not, then we might have to do a general plan amendment if we think it's appropriate. Am I losing anyone so far? Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So let's talk about these amendment processes and the different ways we amend the land use plan through a minor amendment or a zoning amendment, also called a rezone. So when we're going to do an amendment to the land use plan, outside of redoing the whole general plan like we are today, all we're really required to do is publish notice in the paper. We're going to hold a public hearing, and we're required to have a public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. A lot of you have been to City Council meetings and probably seen these take place. However, if we're going to rezone a piece of property, we have kind of an extra step in there. We have to hold a neighborhood meeting and invite people who live within 500 feet of the property that we're going to rezone to come to this meeting and tell us what their concerns are. We also notify them of the upcoming public hearings. And then it's somewhat similar to a land use amendment in there, and then we publish in the paper, and then we hold a public hearing. So I just want to point this out because in the zoning amendment, we actually have more citizen involvement than during the land use. And I think that's just an important point when we start looking at the land use plan. Sorry, I can't remember all this. Okay. So where this gets us in trouble, and I don't, that's not the right word, not gets us in trouble, where we could do better, is that if you look at the land use plan in front of you, you'll see that it's really specific, actually. There's some really tiny dots of commercial. And there's some areas where there is there's a commercial piece on the ground, but it's not shown because it's too small. So when somebody needs to do a land use amendment to a piece of property, they want to build that grocery store, we find out they need to rezone it, then we look and say, you know what, this actually isn't consistent with the general plan, so we need to do a land use amendment as well. We go through as planners, we go through the process of analyzing that during the land use amendment. Is this property right for commercial? What are the types of things that commercial property should have? Does it have access to roads? Does it have water service? And all these different things, just that analysis that we do. So then by the time we get to rezone, we've already done that analysis. So then we invite the public. And then sometimes the public will say, well, you know what, I have this concern about this commercial being next to me. And it's just coming late in the process, in my opinion. We're starting to make land use decisions that are really specific during the land use amendment rather than during the zoning process, which is when we invite the neighborhood. And so that's one of my concerns about the land use plan the way it is currently.
Give me an example where you do a minor land use amendment, but you don't concurrently do a zoning amendment.
Well, they don't always happen concurrently. Someone might change the land use and then not do a zoning
Until later. But it always will come.
Like usually they are done together because somebody needs a zoning amendment, then they need a land use change because they have a plan to build a building, and so they will do them together. But
it's just the time between is what.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody's speculating that we're going to need commercial property to do an amendment, but they don't move forward with the zoning because it's costly and they have to do reports and all this engineering for zoning. And so a year later they come around and do it. That's what might happen. And so my only point, I hope I didn't bog you down with this whole process, but my point is just that because when you have a general plan, and at first I want to back up and just say, this isn't a problem I see just with the Goodyear general plan. This is something that a lot of general plans in the Valley have these same issues. So it's not that the Goodyear general plan has problems or issues. It's just that since we have this opportunity, I'm looking at ways to do land use planning better. And this is one of the ways I think there's an opportunity for improvement. How do we make sure we're involving citizen input at the should we be doing land use amendments for small pieces of property, or should we go ahead and just look at that during the zoning process? Because that's when we invite people, and we're almost doing it twice anyway. So is there a way we can think about making it easier for the citizens and the development community? And so just to show you a little example, pull out your land use plan, and then I'm looking at an area just north of the city center star. And some of you guys might know this property. You can think of the Walgreens, and across the street is the Safeway on Estrella and Yuma. And then there's property to the south of it that's not developed yet. What do you guys think that's going to be? What kind of land use? Commercial, yeah. You can just look at it and know that's going to be commercial because it's a straight parkway and it's two major arterials. But if you look at this land use map and this little point at it, this is designating a little bit commercial, but then this brown is high density residential. And so the plan is actually showing basically a little bit of commercial with an apartment complex. What if the developer actually said, no, I have this great plan to put this great commercial shopping center on that whole piece. Right now, he'd have to go through a minor general plan amendment, and it might happen concurrently, but then they'd also have to then rezone the property to commercial. So my question is, does that help us to do it 2 stages like that for a small piece of property? Or would we get just as much benefit if there was a way to be flexible and just go straight to zoning? Because we can all look at this property and know commercial makes sense. So does it make sense to look at it during the zoning stage? I'm just asking the question. These are the questions I've been asking myself and how we can improve the land use plan. Another opportunity for improvement that I see is these are all our residential categories. You can see we have many. And the main thing that distinguishes them is the density. But what does density really tell us? Here's one of the hard things we have about density. Here's an area in a city, and they calculated that's 30 dwelling units per acre. Now you see on the left there's some open space. Well, if you take that out, it's 37 units per acre. So would I bring it in, or do I leave it out? Does it matter if that open space was built at the same time of the houses or not? It's confusing. But then I could look at one tiny little piece of that development. It's actually 70 units per acre. And I know this is a major city, but we deal with this all the time. There's a large master plan community, Palm Valley, Estrella. Do we look at their density in the whole thing? But when they come in for platting, they come in pieces. And so we're looking at density differently. So again, I'm just bringing up the point that density might not be the best way to measure a residential development and distinguish our residential categories. The other thing is there's good density and bad density. Here's 2 pictures. They probably have very similar density. Which place would you rather live? The one on the left is density where they're doing single-family tract homes on very small lots. The one on the right are townhomes, and it allows them to do more open space. And these are just examples. I'm not saying which one we should do or not. But the thing is, I think what we're trying to get at is quality development. And my question is, does density tell us what's quality? Does density alone tell us where something should be or not? Could these townhomes possibly be somewhere near single-family residential that you wouldn't necessarily want a traditional apartment complex home? Because even though we're looking at a number, they might be built in a way that makes them more compatible to being adjacent to single-family and other types of density. So I'm just asking the question. So just to summarize, I feel that our general plan has become a little bit too detailed. Currently, our general plan amendment criteria says that if something is under 20 acres, you don't have to do a general plan amendment. So to me, that tells me that we shouldn't have swaths of land use that are under 20 acres. But we do. We have lots. We have lots of little 10-acre commercial pieces shown on our general plan. And what that's sorry, I'm having a lot of trouble speaking tonight. But that's created is a level of detail that's not consistent. In some areas of the plan, it shows a 10-acre commercial parcel. In some areas of the plan, it doesn't show a 10-acre commercial parcel because we've let it get a little inconsistent. The next thing is I think that some of our good planning policies aren't highlighted. When we look through the amendments and try and decide this is just the thought process staff has been going through on how can we improve our land use plan. So I kind of loaded this all onto Leslie, and she said, oh, you should check out this plan, and this plan has some great examples. And so I did, and that's what the next two plans are. So I would like to introduce a possible new land use concept to the Goodyear General Plan. So I have, which one are you looking at first? Hannah. Okay. So the first thing you'll notice about Chandler's plan is there's only one residential category. They don't have several. The other thing, if you read the residential text under the residential category, you also see that they allow commercial in their residential category. The other plan, Casa Grande, I like how they call their area neighborhood, their residential category. And their thought is kind of, well, what is in a neighborhood? Well, schools are part of neighborhoods, parks are part of neighborhoods, community commercial is part of neighborhoods. So we don't necessarily need to call those things out, because we all know those are part of neighborhoods, like what makes neighborhoods function. And calling out the convenience store on the corner might be too detailed for the general plan to do. That's the job of the zoning ordinance, is to get detailed like that. This allows us just to be broad, and not decide where those specific little commercial parcels are. Now, something Chandler did is they did these commercial nodes. They said, well, we do want to show where some of the commercial is, but it's shown in a circle and it's hash marked. So it could be residential, it could be commercial. It's a circle, we know it's not going to be shaped like that, so it could grow or shrink. So it kind of tells us that, commercial is going to be in these areas, but we don't know exactly what parcels and what exact size. So it allows the developers a little bit of flexibility to let those parcels develop depending on how the area develops around it.
So on the culture, in Chandler, do you have any agriculture in the city? That's a very good.
It's future land use plan. Not all cities want to have agricultural as a future land use. They see it going away. So the other thing that Chandler did a lot of is they did a lot of overlay districts. So they have that purple employment corridor, but you can see they circled Price Road and said, but Price Road's a different type of employment corridor, and we want something special in that area, different from the areas. So that's a tool Chandler used to call out different kind of areas, even within a certain land use category, and you can see they did it for their airport and some other areas as well. If you look at Casa Grande, they did call out agricultural. They also have a separate category called rural, because they did want to preserve some of their rural residential areas. And so they have a separate category just for that type of residential. Oh,
I just had one question. I mean, I can understand in one aspect the simplicity of this, but I would be, lying if I said it wouldn't bother me if right across the street from me a 400-unit apartment went up because it's a neighborhood and they don't care what goes in that neighborhood. So if you do a plan like this, what's to say or to stop that going up right next to your house that you've invested in?
That's a fantastic question. Where do you think multifamily should go? I mean, I don't want to delve into actual policies here, but my thought is the state statute doesn't require us to have a land use plan. They require us to have land use policies. Every single city in the United States has translated that to mean we need a land use map with colors on it. My proposal to you is that a lot of this protection can be done through policies that are written out rather than colors on a map. So we can have a residential area similar to these two areas, but then say if you're going to place a higher density multifamily development, it has to be adjacent to an arterial. It can't locate just off the collector. It can't be buried in the back of the neighborhood. If it's near single-family residential, you have to buffer it through this, so much landscaping or whatnot. If it's near open space, you're more likely to get it approved.
Have we identified another city that may be a little bit more mirrored to Goodyear? I see Chandler, and I see that we can take a lot of best practices from them. obviously Chandler doesn't have a lot of major freeways going through them like ours and a lot of our future planning. I see Casa Grande a little bit of that, but have we identified whether it's here within Maricopa or somewhere else that is much closer as far as their density, as far as how the land use, that we can try to see how they're going about it?
Well, Casa Grande is in a suburb, exactly of Phoenix, but they have some of the same physical characteristics in that they have a wash cutting through their city. They have a couple of expressways cutting through their city, as Goodyear does. They're actually developed around the same. They have a similar planning area size. They have a similar population, so they have a similar level of growth to hit. They are different, that they don't have the same economic development opportunities that we do, being where we're located. So I think maybe some of their employment, commercial, might not match up as well. Obviously, also, they have a much stronger agricultural component in certain portions of their city, but we have a strong one too. It is hard to, when you're looking at best practices for land use planning, it is difficult to say to cities like us, let's look at their land use plan, because it still might not be the best practice. It might be what they've always known, so it's what they've always done. Yeah.
I think when Casa Grande did its plan, and I think Chandler's was similar and San Luis was similar, is the reason they decided to shift their land use categories is when you look at the Goodyear general plan or the Phoenix general plan or the Scottsdale general plan, it tells you nothing about the city. You see a bunch of little dots. You don't know where the downtown is or the heart of the city is. You don't know what's important to them. You don't know the kind of predominant place that it is. Casa Grande's plan, for example, I think the darker olive green is agricultural, if I'm not mistaken. Rural is their categories. You see that there is an emphasis on rural and on neighborhoods, which is the yellow. You see that their downtown is in the center of their city. It's red. It's what they call their downtown. And you see that all their industrial is spread along the railroad. And actually, Casa Grande's got a huge industrial base. It is the industrial leader of Pinal County. It's got the most progressive Frito-Lay plant, I think, in the country. They went solar. So they, you can see along the I-10 all that blue, and also along the I-8 all that blue. I forgot what they call that, like freeway development or something. Yeah. And those are places where they feel that, the development that's appropriate to a freeway should occur. And they describe what those places are. So that when you look and you read those land use categories and you read what a neighborhood is, in Casa Grande, you realize all those yellow areas are pretty much single-family areas that probably have commercial corners and cores, may have some mixed-use and low-rise apartments in them. When you read the description for that commercial corridor, you realize it's freeway-based development, probably high-density multifamily and office blocks. But it tries to describe the kind of place that those are. And I think that the same thing happened with Chandler. When you look at Chandler, all of South Chandler is very agricultural, very rural. There's a real effort to keep it that way, but they're recognizing that their community is developing. And those commercial cores to Chandler are foci of the neighborhood. And so that kind of is how they describe it. So I think those places are trying more and more to use their plans to talk about the kind of community they want and the kind of places they want in their communities, as opposed to saying on this corner is commercial, meaning Circle K. You know what I mean? What kind of places are we putting in our community? More of a place-based approach to planning.
I'm going to call on Tony.
Tony? Yeah.
Sorry. I think from a public policy standpoint, and you guys may have already talked about this, but I know from our standpoint, I want to get the plan approved. How do you think the landowners are going to feel if they're seeing their high-density residential go to a one standard residential? I like the concept of being able to negotiate it through the process, whether it's residential or commercial. But I know some of these guys went through this process. They fought to get that high density and or that, that C3 commercial or the regional commercial color category. The land use process. How's that going to go?
That's one of my concerns too.
Well, to give a little history,
And for those who don't remember, George represents landowners.
Develop.
He's kind of
guess the question is, how many people in this room went to look at the general plan before you bought your house?
One.
One. Well, Tony, you lived here. Forget you.
Are not most of these categorizations coincident with the actual planning and zoning?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Well,
But the point I'm going
okay.
to is, if you look at a planning and zoning map of the city of Goodyear, a significant portion of the areas of Goodyear are PAE, which to my understanding is a planned area development, which is you as a landowner or developer go in and say, within the confines of the general plan, I want to do this particular mix of things, different density residential, maybe some commercial, et cetera, in there. And my point is that I think doing the general plan as detailed with this, the actual implementation gets a lot fuzzier because of PADs. So this may be a little bit of an exercise in too much detail, because in reality, when landowner or developer comes, if it's 5 acres, they're building a building and a strip mall and that's it. If they're building a large, relatively large development, they're going to make a planned area development. And this is going to soften all around. So maybe this is too much detail.
I do want, going to Mark's point, in the general plan, and all general plans, this is something we're required to have. We have a table, and it shows land use categories and then the zoning categories that correlate with those land use categories. 9 out of our 17 land use categories directly relate to a single zoning district. And to me, that says too much detail. If our land use category only fits for one zoning district, it's almost like we're putting zoning on the map. And we're doing it during the land use stage when we don't get citizens as involved, rather than during the zoning stage when citizens do get involved. Because the most important point of all this is, just because there's not a level of detail on the land use plan, zoning is when you get entitlement. Zoning is what tells you what you can build on your property. The land use plan is just a plan. It just helps us plan our resources correctly, try and figure out how many people we're going to have in the city, where they're going to be. It's a guide that helps us. The zoning tells you what you can build. So when someone comes in to rezone a piece of property, that's when we have the most control. That's when we want to hear from citizens saying, I have a concern with the multifamily being right next to my single-family home because of X, Y, Z. And that's when staff can say, all right, how can we fix this? Is there ways we can design this multifamily that does make it fit? Or is it just not the appropriate place for this at all? My point is, though, that even though land use planning is an entitlement, that when we've just gone through a minor amendment process, or maybe we did now, if we keep this detailed, is that the developer is then going to say, why didn't you bring this up to me then? It's harder for us, like, you approve my amendment, but now you're saying that this land use isn't appropriate on this site. It's like, well, we didn't talk to the citizens until now, the zoning process. So what I see as a planner is that when we start to get into really detailed items, we should be making those decisions at zoning and not at land use. I feel like sometimes it seems like when you look at it, you think, oh, but it's 2 processes. It's better to put a piece of property through 2 processes. It's more checks and balances. But really what it can do is kind of obstruct the process, because you're making decisions before you really get those citizens involved. Does that make sense at all? And I don't have a hidden agenda. I have a couple major goals. I want good quality development to happen in Goodyear. I think one way we can do that better is by making the development process for good quality development as easy as possible. And I think one way to do that is to change our land use plan possibly. So that rather than doing little bits and pieces of minor general plan amendments, and somebody saying, but look, I have my ground category on the map, I can build an apartment complex any way I want to because I have my color on the zoning map, and I don't care that you say land use is an entitlement. We're going to say, no, we're going to make those decisions at zoning. It helps the development community because they don't have to go through an extra developers changing plans left and right, trying to respond to the market. And sometimes they were responding in really good ways, but we would have to put them through costly and time-lane processes that didn't help the community. That helped the community, I'd say, tough, we're going to do it. But I'm not seeing that these minor amendments for tiny parcels of land are providing a really good benefit to our citizens, and that's what concerns me. I do have the same concern. How do we tell residents what's going to be on the land next to them? How do we get information out to them? And I think that there might be ways we can do that. I mean, I do think we can use other information and maybe not just say, oh, there's a general plan on our website, but maybe we can be more proactive with our citizens on getting them development maps and growth maps, and especially we're supposed to have a growth area element, and that's where we try and get information.
I think it's important for the committee to remember that we are the general plan committee as well. We're not zoners and planners, so to put together a general plan, we still have safeguards such as public hearings and written notices in the newspapers that citizens can come out and before planning and zoning meeting or council give their grievances. So we don't want to get too bogged down, I don't think, over the next 18 months with what is this little 5-acre piece of land going to be, whether because of rezoning and amendments anyway, it could change in the future. But I think it's important as a general plan committee to lay out generally what we'd like to see the city look like as far as growth. Dave?
Yeah, I think I got three things, and they're all kind of intertwined together. And one is, I think I prefer the general plan, like either Chandler or what's this, Casa Grande. And basically, because it just opens up the possibilities. One of the issues I see is that a lot of the development is from our agricultural farmland, and there's normally, I don't know, 50, 100 acres, and so it really forces the developer into creating a PAD, which I don't know if the city encourages that or not, kind of thing. It maybe works both ways, but but I see as we move forward that these parcels are going to go away and property is going to get smaller and smaller, and so I think the dynamics change on how we perceive things. So we'll have to look at that.
Jose?
Can this group suggest general guidelines for the PAD also regarding operations? As an example, more specific, agriculture, okay? There is a lot of actually I'm affected. In Australia, we are affected. There is an agricultural land behind our communities, and they are disposing carcasses, which is attracting flies in our windows and before we enter the house, from these houses. Okay? But I don't know if there are operational guidelines, that if there are residential development or primary area next to an agricultural area, the agricultural land has a specific operational guidelines whether they can dispose gas as fertilizer or not. I don't know. I mean, that also in our purview, or that's too detailed.
In general, I think that if we're going to make such a big change to our land use plan, we probably are going to have to talk about how do we implement this. What would it be like for a zoning case to come through with this land use plan compared to our old one, and to make sure is this going to achieve what we hope it achieves? Kind of do some test cases. So I think through that, definitely we're going to get some recommendations. During the zoning process, you're really going to need to look at this and this now, where you might not have been looking at that as closely, and we might need to do some amendments to the zoning ordinance because of that. Your particular case does get into more of a health and safety and not just the land, but yeah, definitely, I think we're going to have to look at that. And just some thoughts on how moving forward with this idea. Now, let me say, if we start moving forward with this and it just Goodyear's land use plan look like rather than showing you Chandler's and Casa Grande's. And these are the land use categories. And my proposal to the committee would be that although we're changing the land use categories, we would start by creating a land use plan that didn't make drastic changes to an individual property owner. So if somebody has industrial and high density residential and residential, we might show that as the neighborhoods and commerce, because we're saying that's kind of what's equivalent, just as a starting to show the development community. And then from that point, we can start thinking of, all right, now is that industrial appropriate there? We're doing that with the landowner at the table, talking about those changes. And I hope that also gives the landowner, Tony's point that he brought up, some, just comfort that, we're not trying to change the land use categories. The way it looks today, you can do just what you did the day before, and just generalizing the land use plan to make it easier to implement. As long as what you were proposing before made good sense. If you had some industrial right next to a single family, next to a school, maybe that wasn't the best land use plan, but hopefully there aren't too many situations of that in our general plan. So then, we do the categories, come up with a draft land use plan. We have another Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on January 16th, which we can talk to them more about it and have them weigh in with their expertise on the land use categories that you came up with. They see zoning cases and amendments all day long, that's what they do. So they might have some really good insight to the categories that you guys come up with on how implementable that is. And then on January 17th, every quarter we hold a development advisory forum meeting, the third Thursday of the month, January, April, and then every quarter. And that's a chance for us to meet with the development community, we focus during the day, and just update them on what's going on. So my hope is that we could have something a little more concrete to talk to the greater development community about, and get them up to speed with thinking about changing our land use plan concept. This is what we hope to accomplish. This is what it probably would look like. And that's kind of leading us up to, you might have noticed on your schedules that we changed the open house meetings from January to February. I promise they don't change them. Sorry, those are set. And it's February 26th in the Stray Star Park Residence Club, February 27th at Western Sky Middle School, and the February 28th meeting is at the front. So then we can go to the larger community in the February open house meetings and get their input on it, all leading us to then our March general plan committee meetings. We were talking about land use concepts again. And that's where we can get into more policy, to look at the land use plan, look at the comments from the commission, development community, the larger public at the open house meetings. And hopefully by then we have a really good idea, like, I think the community is really going to support this, or, it's not going well, maybe we need to back off. So what do you think of that being planned? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we invited to meet at the, or is it just the P and Z and just the council?
No, they're work sessions. They're
Oh,
open. I would love it if you guys come. Now, the work sessions, well, P and Z is more informal, but at city council in work session, they don't always ask for public comment, and that's their prerogative to ask for comment or not to ask for comment. So if you come to the city council work session, I just make that statement that you can come, but they might not ask for public comment on that. And then, I know I just threw a lot of information at you, and I'm really behind changing this concept, like I said, because I think it'll be a benefit for our community. I think it'll help good quality development get through the process easier. I think if we write these policies down, my understanding is from working with the development community is they don't always have a problem doing high quality things. They just need to know what they want up front, and putting them through long processes and saying, well, maybe that's okay, and changing our mind, costing time and money, and that can be a really
too, because if you have a company coming in and wanting to relocate there and said, oh, by the way, you won't be able to open your plant until 3 years from now because the zoning process is this, believe me, they're gonna go someplace else.
And our intent isn't to say, you had this area that was neighborhoods and we want to throw a manufacturing plant on it, let's bypass the process. No, that would still be an amendment. That would still cause us to do this amendment process, because that would still be a major change, going from residential to industrial, some big change like that.
Can you explain a little bit what the difference between a minor amendment and a major amendment is, or what has to happen for someone to get a minor versus a major?
Thanks, great question. So state statute says that we have to have procedures to amend the plan. And all the direction it really gives us is that a major amendment substantially changes our plan. But then we can set criteria for what's a minor amendment and what's a major amendment. In general, we call a minor, in general, if you're changing land that's less than 20 acres, it's probably not going to trigger an amendment. If you're changing land that's from 20 acres to 160 acres, so if you're going from single family to multifamily, 100 acres, that's going to trigger a minor amendment. And that goes through that process I kind of described. It's staff review, you're required to publish notice, and we're holding a public hearing. And it goes to planning and zoning commission, and then city council approves it. Some are called major amendments. If you're amending over 160 acres in our land use plan, or you're making an amendment to the text, or you're making an amendment to other maps, like the roadway classification map, it's a major amendment. And a major amendment is almost the same process as updating a new general plan, except for ratification. We are only allowed to do them once per year. We have to hold one public hearing and consider all major amendments together one time per year. So we usually do that in October to December timeframe. We have to send out the amendments for 60 days to certain parties, such as with the Air Force Base and Arizona State Land Department and our neighboring communities to review and comment. Then we have to hold 2 public hearings in front of commission and 1 public hearing in front of council. So if you need trigger a major amendment, it is quite a lengthy process. If it's December and you just missed it, you're going to wait an entire year before you can make that major amendment. And so at some point through this process, we're going to look at that criteria. Whether we change the land use plan or not, we need to review that and make sure that the amendment criteria is working correctly for us. So that would still happen if we change the land use plan. We would set, if you're going to change the acreage in this size of property, it's a minor. If it's this size of property, it's a major. I don't want to confuse it too much, but it also might depend on what category you're going from. Right now, if you're going from a lower density residential to a higher density residential, it might be a minor amendment. But if you're going from residential to an industrial, that might trigger a major amendment, since that's a big deal, going from residential to non-residential type amendments. Does that make sense? So, yeah.
The difference is also in the major, it's a 2/3 vote, right, from the council?
Yes,
It's a 2/3 as opposed to a minor or any other thing, it's just simply a majority of the council.
Yeah.
So politically,
Does a major have to be voted on?
it does, but it requires a 2/3 vote.
No, not.
Not by the public, just
Oh, it's not
By the council,
It ends
as opposed to a majority, so it makes that process even more difficult from a political standpoint.
So, like I said, I threw a lot at you, so look at it, think about it. If you think about, oh man, how are they going to handle this? Feel free to email me, and I'd love to hear your concerns before the meeting. Then I can bring them up at the next meeting. These are the concerns I had, because there's no perfect answer. Whichever way we go, there's going to be pros and cons to either land use plan that we go through. I mean, nothing's perfect, so there are going to be challenges. It's not going to be a cure-all to change
Thank you, Katie. At this time, if anyone from the committee has an announcement or a question for the group, you may bring it to the committee at this time. And while you're thinking about it, I'm going to kind of ambush one of our committee members. I believe, Deb, I heard that you addressed your HOA at the last meeting. Would you like to take a few minutes and tell us? Because, you know, from the beginning, we were told we're supposed to be good ambassadors for the general plan. And this is one way that we can be a good ambassador and let our neighbors know what's going on, is to address our alliances and HOAs. Go ahead, Deb.
Well, I think it's important that we're here, but we have our own ideas, and we really want to get everyone's ideas in the community. And so basically, Katie put together a really nice handout for me that talked about the different plans, the general plan, the participation plan, and the tax structure, and the timetable of the general plan, and then lastly, how you can get involved. There were about 60 people at the meeting, which it was a very well-attended meeting because it was an important topic before it about the birds, the coots. And so I followed the coots presentation, and I asked first how many people actually knew that Goodyear was updating the plan, and I'd say maybe 10 or 12 people raised their hands. I thought that was pretty good. And people were pretty receptive. There was a few questions, and some I couldn't answer. I actually asked Katie, and she gave me some information. But I think it's important for us to do that because it's not just what we think is important, it's what everyone thinks is important. So it didn't take very long, like 10 minutes, and it was pretty easy.
Well, thank you very much. I also just want to make a statement. On January the 12th, my neighborhood is rededicating Parc de Paz, which just went through a rather lengthy renovation. And one of the things I'm going to be doing there as well is letting my neighbors know about the general plan and 2025 and what we're doing. So it's a good way to get the information out, and we want to do that throughout the whole course of our meetings. We don't want to just throw it out there when we're all done and people say, what's this? So any ideas and anything anybody wants to do to be an ambassador for our committee, we would certainly encourage that and welcome that. Any other subjects to bring up before the committee? Yes.
I have kind
Jessica.
of a ridiculous logistical question, but it's that because it's getting a little bit colder and I'm freezing in here, and I would never ask us to turn the air conditioning off with this many bodies, if there's any way that we could get hot drinks as opposed to ice cold water and ice cold soda, I would love that. I was completely off topic, but.
That's okay.
No, definitely.
And at this time, I'd like to ask Katie Wilkin to give us an update on staff communications.
Thank you. Just real quick, Ryan and Eduardo, I still need your ethics, so please don't leave without giving me your ethics sheet. I also did just want to mention that Leslie mentioned something earlier called Mind Mixer. And basically, we're trying to get, and I'm hoping that we have it by January, and I can introduce it to you, an interactive website for commenting. And, I showed you that commenting on the Goodyear site now, and it's limited, and it's a little hard to use. But there's these tools out there right now that some other communities are using that really gets online participation working really well. If you have time, there's a website called My Plan Phoenix. It's myplanphx.com. And they're using the same software, and people who live in Phoenix can post ideas and make comments. And so I'm hoping this will be a better tool for us. So just to explain what she meant when she mentioned Mind Mixer, and hopefully that's coming down the line. And I know I said it before, I apologize, we're moving the open house meetings, but please put those February open house meetings now. They won't change again. I'm hoping at the January meeting that I'll have handouts for you that you can distribute then at your meetings and to your community members about the open house meetings. There should also be an announcement about them in the January edition of the In Focus Citizen magazine. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. If there be, yes, Jose.
Yesterday, we communicated, we'll be having a presentation at the next meeting, the status of the accomplishments of the community plan. Is that what you said?
Yes. We will get to that when we talk about the water resources
Yeah.
element, but
This is preparation.
yeah, we'll make note of that. I know there's also I think been some council work sessions discussing that topic of water capacity, and so if I can find some of those, I'll find the links so you can watch those work sessions at home, and also maybe get some more detailed information if that's a particular topic you're really interested in.
Okay, if there's no further business, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? And a second? Meeting adjourned.